All right, we're just at 7 o'clock. I think we'll go ahead and get started with our program this evening. I'm Mary Cronin, the Director of Audience Engagement. I'd like to welcome you to Brandywine Museum of Art's program this evening, A Family of Artists, Allan and Maya Freelon. We're recording this program and we will share the recording on Brandywine's YouTube channel in about 2 weeks. And we also ask that we're happy to take questions, and if you would please add those into the chat, that would be the best way to ask a question this evening. Tonight, we're pleased to welcome award-winning artist Maya Freelon to be in conversation with Brandywine's senior curator, Dr. Amanda Burdan. The exhibition featuring the work of Maya's great-grandfather, Allan Freelon, will be on view at the museum through January 21st. And we are going to go ahead and get started. I'll turn this over to Amanda.
Thanks, Mary. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to have you all here joining us. Let me just say the exhibition that's currently on view is a collaboration with our summer intern from last year, Olive Collinson. And I hope if she can't join us tonight, she'll be able to watch this recording. A lot of what was written in the exhibition is her work, and I'm happy to facilitate this discussion and keep the work moving forward. I just want to give a kind of a brief impression of my introduction to the Freelon family of artists, and then we're going to talk about several different members of the family tonight with Maya as our guide. So a few years back, I was working on an exhibition of American Impressionism, and my field of study is women artists in art of the United States, and I was actively seeking women to represent in that exhibition. And I discovered, it was there to be found, but not as publicized as I think it should be, the work of Allan Randall Freelon Sr., a wonderful American Impressionist in the early 20th century who was based in Philadelphia, but worked in New England, that basically I knew I had to include in the exhibition. And the story is that I was going to a gallery to ask if I could borrow that painting to put in the exhibition, and interest grew within the Brandywine community, and we put together a request and proposal, and actually were able to purchase the painting instead of just borrowing it. So it is now in our Brandywine collection. You will see it. But in doing research then on the new painting in our collection, I discovered Maya Freelon's work. I discovered other members of the Freelon family who we'll discuss tonight. Maya's work, as we'll look at together, is just colorful and joyful, and just not that I want to say it's any more or less better, different than her great-grandfather's work, but it just made me think, here in the world of the Wyeth family, how different members of a very creative family can express themselves and influence one another. And I thought that would be a wonderful conversation to have here with Maya, what it's like. We all think about the Wyeth family in our programming and our exhibitions quite a bit. And so here is another creative family that we can delve into here. So what I'd like to do tonight is I'm going to start with just a little screen share, and Maya will join us in just a few minutes for some questions. All right, sharing my screen. Here it is. Click it and open it wide for you all to see. This is a family of artists, and though it says Allan and Maya Freelon, we will be talking about other members of the family as well. In case you have not been or have not been recently to the Brandywine, I just wanted to give you a quick view of the exhibition. Allan Freelon, painter, printmaker, teacher. And so you can see it's in our Strawbridge Gallery. There in the distance is the painting that I discussed earlier. And you'll see that this is mostly an exhibition of prints. And we'll take a few minutes to talk about printmaking and painting in Allan Freelon's work as we go along. The connection is very strong to the Philadelphia area. Freelon was based in the city of Philadelphia. He taught at many educational institutions throughout the city and was the art department head for the public school system in Philadelphia. So we're very interested, especially in our region, in learning more and promoting his artwork and his historical experience. Oh my goodness. Let's go forward. So tonight, just like when we have a Wyeth family discussion, we have to all know who we're talking about. I wanted to show a little bit of who we're talking about in the Freelon family. So if you begin at the base here, Allan Randall Freelon Sr. is the artist whose work is on view in our galleries now. His son, Allan Randall Freelon Jr., is pictured at right in a photograph that Maya provided for us. His grandson, Philip Goodwin Freelon, you see at left there, is an architect whose work we'll take a peek at later the evening. And then their children, Maya, Dean, and Pierce, will all also play into the picture as well. But there in the center is Maya, whom we are talking about. So you can see this is 4 generations here of a family that we are looking at. So let's take a moment to stop my share here before we go into any great detail. And I want to welcome Maya and talk to you a little bit about living in a family of artists and finding out about your great-grandfather's work. I mean, was it something that was always hanging on the walls in the house, or was it in an attic somewhere? How did you come upon it?
Thanks so much. Thanks for inviting me and for having the idea. I've never been in this kind of discussion before, and I feel really honored to be included. So thanks for that. I never met my great-grandfather, but my grandfather, Allan Jr., talked about him a lot, and so did my father. I found out about him when I went to school. I actually went to a boarding school in Western Massachusetts called Williston. And my grandfather actually really wanted me to go there because my older cousin had been to that school as well. So I came from North Carolina and went up north and I started painting. Before that, I was mainly working with ceramics and kind of found object sculpture. And I started painting and it started to come really easily to me. And I remember calling my parents and being like, I love painting. And they reminded me, oh, your great grandfather was a painter. And that was the moment where I realized that what your parents pass down and genes do play a role in what you do and what you make. It just felt easy. And I went straight into oil painting. And I did a portrait that looked really similar to something a painting he had done that I had never seen before. So that was really interesting. At the same time, there was a show at Mecklenburg College, Muhlenberg in Mecklenburg. And it was called The Rediscovery of Allan Freelon. And that was a little retrospective. I don't remember the curator's name, but it was the first time that I saw his work in a gallery space. And it was beautiful to see. And so I realized then that, my father was an architect and my dad and my mom, jazz singer. And so I went to NC State design camp and I realized I don't draw straight lines. So I'm not taking up that side. And I also do not have a beautiful singing voice like my mom. So I'm somewhere in between doing something kind of similar to both, but in my own lane.
That's awesome that you sort of came upon painting in your own time and then made the connection. So there was no like pressure to carry on the family business or anything like that.
Definitely. It was actually surprising. If your great grandfather's a painter as a teenager, you're like, okay, what kind of painter? Like, was it a hobby? I didn't really do any research or really understand how important he was to actually the history of Black artists in America. That came much later. And it's been a joy researching and discovering more about him as I grew.
And you have, you've authored an essay about your great-grandfather and contributed to the scholarship already, even as a college student, contributing to, um, uh, you know, moving the story forward, keeping the story current and alive, and helping folks like me, when I read your catalog from the North Carolina Museum of Art, helping me to understand. And it was wonderful to get also the insider's perspective. So many times when we're historians and we're learning about an artist, it's sort of a treasure hunt, right? And you live in the heart of the treasure trove. The most people that knew of, or the clues, or the family photographs, you're right within it. So we're so privileged to have that access to you. So do you want to tell us a little bit about, before we show some pictures, maybe a little bit about what your first impressions of your great-grandfather's work were, when you said, oh, he's a painter? And you saw them in the gallery, did you feel like it was historic? Did they feel contemporary to you? Was there
Well, we always had his artwork hanging at home. So I knew it was signed Freelon. I just didn't know what the history was. And as a child, you kind of take for granted what's hanging on the wall, but as you become older, those are memories because they're kind of infused in your history and your growth. And so stepping into a gallery space immediately made me feel proud. It's my same last name. It's other people are interested in this person, and it was great to rediscover him at the same time. I also really enjoyed creating artwork that was abstract. And as an impressionist painter, he sometimes came under certain criticism from the New Negro movement of not making Black art or not making art that was about the struggle, which it's not true that he didn't make that kind of art. That's actually, his passion was landscapes, but he also made a print called Barbecue American Style, which had a bunch of Black bodies on top of, someone who was lynching someone. So it wasn't that he wasn't a proponent against racism or understand what it meant to be a Black man in America. He just had a passion, and I completely understand that as well. I feel the same way for the work that I make. You might not know who I am or what I am when you come and look at it, but that's very much part of my artistic identity.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what strikes me as I introduced you, that the joy and that passion certainly comes across. So let's not to move too quickly through your ancestry, but I can't wait to show your work as well. So let me go back, and if there's any other questions you have as we go along, as we're talking, just throw them in the chat. We'll either get them at one of our question breaks or at the very end. So let me go back to share the screen and move on to see. Let's see, just a little bit of biography as I learned it. And some of the things that I was so impressed with was essentially, Allan Freelon Sr.'s life of service. He served in the military during World War I. And he was stationed here at Fort Dodge, Iowa. Now, I can't say that he's in that photograph on the left-hand side, but it does come from Fort Dodge, Iowa during the years when Freelon was there. And it was a training camp for African-American officers in the war. And so there's service to country, but then also service to the city of Philadelphia. I swear, Allan Freelon Sr. attended every institution of higher education in Philadelphia: University of Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia Museum School, the Barnes Foundation, Temple University, and he has left a mark and left a trace in all of these educational facilities. So I thought it was wonderful to show him probably at maybe one of his own graduations from the many degrees he had. He also traveled to Gloucester, Massachusetts, one of the key colonies for American Impressionist artwork. That's in Cape Ann, in Massachusetts. You will find the Cape Ann Museum has work by Freelon, and they have this wonderful photograph undated, but from the time early in the century when Freelon was visiting in the summertime with other Philadelphia-based artists like Hugh Henry Breckenridge and other city teachers that would go to New England to do this plein air landscape painting. And it is very remarkable, first to me as a historian of women, the number of women that are in this colony. You see here, they're sitting, there's maybe a class going on, they're wearing smocks. There's an easel to the left-hand side, but you see standing to the second from right is Allan Freelon. And you do realize that he is singular and alone as a person of color in this photograph, which is very reflective of the American art community, the American Impressionist community, the community in Gloucester, Massachusetts of art colony painters. And so this is always, even as Maya says, he's passionate about painting landscapes, but there's always an element of him doing something outside of what everyone else is doing at that moment, whether it's, you know, participation in the Harlem Renaissance or his choice to be an American Impressionist. Here's a wonderful documentary photograph of Freelon working in Gloucester, painting a little study of a barn that we can then see on the right-hand side. And I want you to remember this view of the marshy dock and the red barn, because we're going to see it a little bit later in the exhibition. Again, undated, but courtesy of the Cape Ann Museum. Here is a little bit more of a view of the painting that Brandywine owns, which is set in Gloucester, Massachusetts. It's the harbor. For those of you familiar with our collection, this is in such harmony with the experimental work that N.C. Wyeth did in the coastal scenes in Maine, where he experimented with Impressionism. He experimented with some strains of modernism. I think it's wonderful that someone like Freelon or N.C. Wyeth had their workaday world in Philadelphia or in Chadds Ford, but then when they went away, the summers, whether it's in Massachusetts or Maine, this creative, extra experimental side could come out as well. And I just want to remind you that Freelon's talents extend far beyond American Impressionist paintings. The exhibition on view at the Brandywine is predominantly made up of his printmaking, which is something that he engaged in the city of Philadelphia. And so I selected just two beautiful nighttime scenes of the city of Philadelphia. These architectural views, now that I'm thinking of it, could have been slightly inspirational for another generation of artists in the family. So I wanted to bring back this service strain again. In these two photographs, the left-hand side is an art competition or an art award that's being given, I believe, at the Pyramid Club in Philadelphia, an African-American social organization. And then on the right-hand side, this is near the end of Allan Freelon's life, as he is still working for the city of Philadelphia. One of his great projects was to run a district art competition for students across the school district. And he would give awards to selected students that he chose. And you see he's pinning an award on the lapel of the young boy standing by him. For those of you familiar with our collection, you may recall a recent exhibition about the artist Peter Payon, or has seen his self-portrait in our galleries. Peter Payon, the Philadelphia artist, was a student of Allan Freelon and had won several of those pins. He still has them. He showed them off proudly. And a lot of my information and understanding about Allan Freelon's teaching came from talking with Peter and him sharing his firsthand experiences. So Maya, let's go back to you. I'm going to stop my share again. And that's just like a little art historical breeze through your great-grandfather's life. But I'm wondering, some of the themes that brought up for me is thinking about teaching, because you're a teacher as well, right?
I was gonna say, I think the overarching theme here is teaching, and teaching is a way to give back, especially if you're coming from a family of privilege or one that has access to certain educational resources that others don't. And I think I saw my Uncle Chip logging on there as we started, who is also an amazing teacher and just amazing mind. I think it must just kind of flow through us. Every single one of my relatives teaches in some capacity. And I can see that also running through the bloodline, and just that when too much one is given, much is expected. And that is a great responsibility, not to just kind of hold on to your talent, but to help uplift others. And that's something that's definitely been passed down, and something that I'm passing down to my children as well.
That is one of the main themes in talking with Peter Payon, who still recalls very vividly his days as a student, and the fact that Mr. Freelon came to visit him when he was a boy, because he lived and grew up in South Philadelphia and had never been outside of South Philadelphia. But
Wow.
Allan Freelon was advocating for him to attend an art specialty school outside of the neighborhood. But Mr. Payon's parents were not entirely sure. They wanted him going out of the neighborhood. So he came to visit and came for dinner to talk about the great opportunities that Peter would have if he took this art training. And he kind of took him under his wing for the rest of his growth and career as a student. And that's the one thing that Peter emphasizes is, even as a teacher himself, he taught at the Pennsylvania Academy for many years, that Freelon taught him that if you have this talent, you have a responsibility to share, not just by producing artwork, but by helping others create too. So that is this service that I see that's throughout you say there are other teachers in the family too.
Yeah,
So it's
I mean, everybody in some capacity. The other thing that you brought up was the Barnes Foundation, which is really interesting because of that history of keeping everything the same in the same place. And when I was an undergraduate at Lafayette College, my printmaking teacher brought us there on a visit. And because the will of the Barnes family was to keep it exactly the same, I knew that I was taking the same steps that he took while looking at the artwork on the wall. And it was just a surreal experience to say, I know you were standing here. I know you were standing exactly at this space. I know you walked through the space. And of course, there's the controversy or what have you about it actually turning into a museum and moving. I saw it at the original location. So it wasn't like a transplant. It was really special to kind of think about maybe what he was thinking. Oh my God. Hello.
Hello, welcome.
I told you somebody might pop up. It was just interesting to be in a space that the same exact space. That was just something unique that could only have happened in a situation like that.
Let me ask you this, because at Brandywine, with our Wyeth family connections, we have the house and studio of N.C. Wyeth as historic properties and the studio of Andrew Wyeth as historic property. And we try and give people the same concept of, you're standing in the space where something was created, where an inspiration happened. There's a parallel to that, knowing you're looking at the same paintings in the same arrangement. And that just leads me to think, is Allan Freelon's studio still standing? Is this part of the family yet?
Unfortunately, no, we don't know. We can't pinpoint exactly where in Gloucester or the farm, at least not from what we understand from our family records. And also when you get married and then you get divorced and then you get remarried, your art, if you don't have a will or specific definition or an estate, that artwork becomes lost, or it goes into another, it's just a more complicated situation.
Right.
What happened.
So for folks in our area, even though he taught in Philadelphia, there was a home in Telford, Pennsylvania. It was called Windy Crest, and he did even take students in Telford. And I've been working on this too. I haven't driven out there, but I found a few references to the name of the street where it would be. So I thought I'd just take a look around and just get a sense for the feel of the community. Of course, it may have changed drastically over the decades, and to take a look and see that. So one other thing that you just mentioned there that I had been curious about, have the family been collecting work by Freelon, or did you have a group of the works that are still within the family, and have you exhibited them?
So the exhibition that started at NC Central, that was a lot of our personal collection, but the curator there was able to reach out to folks and get a lot of work that was borrowed. And a lot of that we had never seen before. Like I said, there was a complicated history of what happened to the actual artwork. A lot of it went missing for a while. Sometimes we would get packages that said, you know, we don't know where they came from, but they would be Allan's work. And so it was interesting to know that your great-grandfather or your father or your grandfather has work out there that is owned by other people, but it's your grandfather, it's your family art. So taking emotion out of it, it was really interesting to see these letters. The things that we held on to were actually hand given to the children of Allan Jr. And so those we hold very dear, because the actual paintings, a lot of them are still out there. A lot of them were unaccounted for or are still popping up, and people saying, oh, I have this, I have that. So every time we see a new work, it's a rediscovery for us as well. But we were able to take his papers and recently donated them to the Archives of American Art. And so it's now housed in a place where other people can come and research and study, just outside of our Freelon family estate work.
Right, right. And speaking of your family, I see we have a message that popped up from Gregory Freelon.
Oh, my uncle.
And he's just saying that he visited his grandfather's farm in the late 70s. And it was he'd converted the barn, as so many artists in our rural area would do, to be a teaching studio. And there are archival photographs of him teaching there. I believe I've seen at least one of them. And so, you know, this is just more research, just like paintings out there to be found, buildings to be discovered.
Yes.
But Maya, let's turn and talk about your work. And so I'm going to put some images up, but let's talk through them together as we share the screen again. And I think the very first image that I have is you doing a project, standing in front of a Smithsonian project that you worked on. And this is, for folks that hadn't already seen your work, this is what I'm referring to with the big, colorful, joyful, you know, taking up space kind of work that Maya is known for. So can you tell us a little bit about this project? I have another picture too.
Sure. This was actually commissioned by Halcyon in DC, and it was exhibited at the Smithsonian Arts and Industries building, which is a building that isn't always open, but sometimes they do special projects there. And the festival is called By the People. And they basically, after we got through all the red tape of exhibiting in a Smithsonian museum, where they allowed us to go up in a lift and hang from the rafters these tissue quilts, which are completely made out of tissue paper and adhesive and kind of reinforced on a fabric middle so that they don't fall by their own weight. And because the space was so airy, they kind of floated in the breeze. You can kind of see some of those making some movement there. And it was my largest installation as of yet. And we only had 3 days to put it up. And it was up for only just a weekend. So looking at the pictures again, I'm like, I don't even know how I did that.
Well, I mean, that's actually my next question. Like, how do you do that? Let me put another example up. This is a current piece from an exhibition that is traveling the country called Emancipation, the Unfinished Project of Liberation. So a smaller scale piece, but we can see it's still a similar kind of technique. Can you walk us through your practice? How do you make something that looks so fragile like this?
Sure. The idea behind it is actually on my mom's side of the family. So the other, the Pierce side, which is my mom's maiden name, she was a school teacher. I guess I'm getting it on both sides. And she was part of the great Black migration for jobs and more opportunity. She was born in Texarkana, Texas in 1928 and moved up to the Boston area where she was a school teacher and a hairdresser. And when I went to graduate school at the museum school in Boston, I lived with her. And she was a grandma who had a bunch of stuff and never threw anything out. And so I would go into her basement and look for things to make. And one day I found a stack of rainbow tissue paper that had a beautiful stain on it. And that was 17 years ago. And I've been working with tissue paper ever since. It's just, as a medium, it reminds me of the fragility of life, but also the strength of coming together. And so I love it when people come in to my site-specific installations and they're like, it's so fragile, it's so beautiful, it's so, how do you do that? It's that feeling that comes up when you want to preserve something or when you love something or when you don't know how it's made. That sense of awe is what I'm seeking, but also to know that there's strength and unity. And so so this work, I work in pieces, and it also rolls up like a quilt too, and it's very lightweight. So that's how I can explode in a space that's so large, but at the same time it's compact, and there are layers, but it is just tissue paper. And
here's
so
another view of that piece. And you know, something you just said there, I was thinking textile, but in a way, paper is very similar. Threads in a textile that are woven together. But have you made paper on your own? You know, the fibers, they bond together to make it stronger. And these individual threads that would be nothing on their own become stronger.
That's actually an interesting point. When I was a little kid, I remember getting a paper making kit where you took recycled paper, blended it, and strained it. So I did learn how to make paper as a child. I made my own journals. And it's about trusting the medium, but also like a spider web, you know. I think silk is one of the strongest threads and fabrics there are, but it's also, you know, the same thing that you walk through and you're like, spider web. So
it is, it's kind of this contradiction of fragility and strength all together. And silk is sort of both, you know, in the form we think of it as a textile, but also in the form we think of it as, you know, that secretion that is just, you know, whether it's a spider web or silkworms or something like that.
Out of something so tiny and so supposedly insignificant can create these giant, big, amazing things. And also the layering and it's about spinning it together. And I've never even made that connection to a spider until you brought up the textile. But
well, I mean, not to go off on a tangent, but I saw a wonderful exhibition at the Allentown Art Museum for folks in our area that you might be interested in. An artist has followed the theme of weaving and spinning as it's been allied with symbolism of women and power and strength over the years. So my worlds are colliding.
No, I need to see that.
Angela Fraley is the artist, and she's been studying witchcraft throughout the centuries and has found, shout out to Angela, has found this common, not to be punny, but a common thread that weavers were often accused of, this female power called witchcraft.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that. Yeah, that's right
Yeah.
down my alley. I very
Oh,
much resonate with that.
like that's so cool. But we've been sitting here looking at the work behind you, and I think maybe it's time to look at pieces that look a little bit more like that.
Yeah.
These are, correct me if I'm wrong, from a series you're still working on or have been working on. Is this Between Us?
Yes. So there's another Brandywine. It's called the Brandywine Print Shop in Philadelphia. No relation to this Brandywine, but both have an amazing name. And there, that's a historically, they host Black artists, young and mid-career and established artists to create custom prints, art prints in their studio. So I did a residency there, and I wanted to use one of my great-grandfather's photographs and kind of have a collaboration between us. And so there's this tiny little photograph from when he was enlisted in World War I. And some of his writing and journals indicate that he didn't want to go to war, that it was not his choice, that he witnessed murder and a lot of stuff that he didn't want to see, and it caused a mental breakdown for him. And so he's standing and kind of adjusting his uniform, but he's looking down. And so I titled this work "Look Down on War." And from the print, we enlarged it, and then I added my own monoprint, tissue ink monoprint in conjunction with that image. And so that was the first time that I used his actual photographs in my artwork. But a lot of folks don't know also, Allan Sr. was an amazing photographer.
Wow.
And worked and has a lot of photographs that he took. In fact, that photo that you showed earlier, the first one, is in one of his teaching studios. It was on a self-timer, and he took it himself because there's a
Wow.
series of them, and you can tell it was like the first selfie, like I'm putting timer, get in there. And the light was just right. It's just so beautiful. But when you did a selfie, then you had to wait, develop it, and see if any of them turned out good. It wasn't like you could take 1,000.
Yeah.
And so the picture on the right is actually a relative of mine. I think it's Aunt Hilda. I'll have to ask my uncle about that. This is also a photograph, and you can't really tell, but she's standing on a dock. And I thought about how we can have shared memories, and again, this ancestry and connection without meeting our relatives. And so I was thinking about what she might have been thinking about, and the space in between the time he took this photograph and the time that I made the artwork is this, how do we gel those things together? And so this is another work, and the work behind me also is part of the Between Us series, which is his photographs and my art juxtaposed.
And it looks like I
It's
have
that.
that one here.
Yep,
That's
same one.
wonderful. Yeah. So I see in this one, it's exhibited juxtaposed with one of your tissue creations as well. So they do have a really nice visual, rhyme to them on top of it all. Yeah.
Yeah, the ink actually and how I paint is with the bleeding tissue paper, the paper that got a stain because it was water damaged and considered, a mistake or a accident. And so that beautiful accident is what sparked working with tissue paper.
That's really great. And it continues on. Now, there is a new project on the horizon that I hope, it was, I just read the press release. Before we even get to that, cute. Is this someone we know? You're not
Yes,
in this picture,
this
are
is
you?
my the grandmother that I was telling you about. She's on the left, and if you look at her shirt underneath, you'll see like a little scribble that says "cute." That's where it came
Oh,
from. And her sister, Deborah, is to the right, and
right.
that photograph is again tiny. So working with these memories in these old black and white photographs. Sometimes I know them, sometimes I don't. And this one, I don't know who took this photograph, but yeah, those are relatives as well.
Well, the project I just, jumped ahead and mentioned actually has a parallel with these and working with photographs and further processing that. So this brand new project just announced, called Whippersnappers: Recapturing, Reviewing, and Reimagining the Lives of Enslaved Children in the United States. Tell us about this awesome honor that you've just won.
Well, I applied for this grant about a year ago, put forth by the Library of Congress, and they have an initiative spreading the awareness that their archives are digital and that you can search right from your computer at home all of these archives that they've digitized. And so they selected artists who would make projects using their digital collection. And so that's the Connecting Communities Digital Initiative. And so my proposal, because I've seen these images before, they're all in the public domain because of their age. And the date that they were created, their copyright has expired, so they kind of exist. So you might go, you can, if you Google search it, you can see people, because they're in the public domain, will print them and sell them as their own prints. But what I wanted to do was select certain images and have them photographs specifically of African American children. African Americans specifically have a history that is disjointed and disconnected, as opposed to the rest of the African diaspora. So oftentimes we look at photographs and say, oh, that looks like you, or that looks like somebody that I know. And there's some familiarity and desire to piece together a history that has been scrambled because of the enslavement of African American people. And so I wanted to take photos. There's a lot of photos of children. And I wanted to take photos of those archives and contemporary photos of African American children and create an exhibition that uses both of those in the same kind of style of the monoprint.
That's great, because you've taken something very specific to you in your family photographs, but now it's like exploring the universal aspect of that by maybe people that are not known. And I'm certain that these are unidentified sitters and unidentified photographers in these collections too, and bringing those forward, even if they have not been in a cherished family collection all their lives.
Yes, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the research. I have to go and visit DC and actually meet with the library team, and then I have until November 2024 to get it together, so stay tuned.
Okay, well, we'll do another program later where we'll see what's happened in the interim. No, I should let you all know that because Allan Freelon has entered our collection, I'm looking to do more research, more programs, get more collections. And I don't think this will be the last collaboration with Maya Freelon coming for the Brandywine. Not to give short shrift to the rest of the family, but you have an amazing architect in the family, Philip Freelon. Maybe people don't recognize the name, but boy, they recognize the structure. On the right-hand side, he is standing in front of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, where he was the leader of the design team. And for folks at Brandywine, you may find the image on the left-hand side familiar. It's a children's book that was illustrated by Laura Freeman. Laura Freeman was commissioned to do some of the work for our suffrage exhibition. So you may have seen this book in our shop at the time. But I just, as a tangent, because Brandywine has such a strong history of illustration, and our current exhibition is about children's book illustration and family, I just wanted to take a look at one of the spreads in Laura's book and show you how she depicts Allan Randall Freelon Sr. on the right-hand side at his palette with the easel, very familiar looking Gloucester scenes. And if you look to the distance, And near the corner, you see a reproduction of that painting we looked at earlier from Gloucester. And then the figure on the left-hand side, Maya, this would be your father, right?
Yeah, he has I won't ruin the story. And if
Right,
all
right.
y'all who are here know one young person who needs a book, and go
Yeah.
ahead and get that for them, because it tells a really amazing story about my father visiting his studio and some of the lessons that he shared. I mean, the book is for anybody age, 3 up to 12 years old, I would say, but it's also just a great read to get a little insight about how my dad's grandfather influenced his work.
And so it's very much in keeping with our theme here tonight about those family influences. And even though you did not ever get the chance to meet your great grandfather, I'm sure the inspirations and lessons came down through your grandfather and father as well. I wanted to show you a couple of additional works. I mean, talk about being the opposite of something you would say is fragile, right? Your father's architectural forms, they're known for having bold design, bold shape, but also containing very contemplative spaces. So sort of like almost hard on the outside and very comforting on the inside, I would say, and having visited a few of them myself. This is the National Center for Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta, and it's just glorious and gorgeous. And then I just wanted to throw a spotlight on his most recent and posthumous work, because unfortunately, Philip Freelon passed away not that long ago, and this is his last work, right, Maya?
Yes, this is North Carolina Freedom Park in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's open all the time. So if you're ever flying to RDU, take a stop and see it. It's a project that took a really long time to come to fruition, almost 8 years, 8 to 10 years, just because whenever you're doing work on land that's owned by the state, it's just a lot that you have to conform to. But it's the only public memorial in North Carolina to celebrate African-American struggle and history, and celebrate our freedom. And so it's going to become one of the landing points for most school trips to the capital of the state, and which is Raleigh, North Carolina. And so when that opened, I remember going and representing the family, hearing our governor, Roy Cooper, speak and talk about how important it is to have a memorial up, celebrating and honoring, those who came before us. And so it's really special, I think, for my father to end on that note, and to leave that legacy is something that we can go to as a family, but also much more important for just the rest of the world. Same for the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Now, would you say there's, knowing his work, is there like a design motif that you think embodies what his work, his own particular style?
I think he was a fearless leader, designer, and innovator. Like I said, he knew how to draw the straight lines, but he thought really creatively and abstractly, and was able to translate that into something that could function. And although you can't live in a tissue quilt, you can definitely look at it, and I always need a place to put them. So I have had several instances where I've shown in his museums that he's created.
That's amazing.
Particularly the Reginald F. Lewis Museum in Baltimore, and the Gantt Center in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
And
That was going to
also
be
the
another.
MOAD in San Francisco.
Yeah, another question about where we can go and see more of the architectural pieces too.
Yes.
So let us turn now, before we close, to the rest of that talented Freelon family. Those in your nearest family, can you introduce us to the folks that we have before us here?
Sure. In the middle, there's my mom, the jazz singer. and 7-time Grammy nominee. And the last 2 Grammy nominations she's received in conjunction with her son, my brother Pierce to the right, who has started making children's music, and he is more of the musician of the family. And so they've collaborated, and they'll be going for Best Children's Album in this coming up Grammy season 2024. And then my brother on the left, he is moving from UNC here in North Carolina to the University of Pennsylvania, and where he'll be a distinguished professor starting in the spring, actually spring 2024. They're actually moving over the summer. So we are sad to see him go, but I will be up north more often to see my niece and nephew and my family up there. And he was able to actually name his professorship, his chair, after Allan Sr. And so that was really special when he was hired for them.
So
And I
it's the
shared.
Allan Randall Freelon Senior Chair that he will be
Yeah, I think
occupying.
that there's some other parts to that. But there's a press release if you just search, and it actually comes 100 years after he received his degree from there as well.
Amazing.
So
We
it's
are
really,
so happy to have a Freelon back in Philadelphia too.
yeah, we got to come back.
You know, it just, I know I've been remarking on it through the evening as we've been talking, but at the Brandywine and with the Wyeth family, there are certain names that are known better than others. For instance, Andrew or NC Wyeth, but the whole family it plays a part in this artistic legacy. For the Wyeths, Henriette and Carolyn Wyeth were ahead of the curve in terms of being independent women artists in Philadelphia and here in Pennsylvania. Nathaniel, the amazing inventor, very talented and a creative thinker, and I'm sure he could draw the straight lines in his work for DuPont. There's Anne, the musician, who was commissioned by the Philadelphia Orchestra and had her compositions played when she was just a teenager. And even down to the next generation, we're just learning how Andrew Wyeth's wife, Betsy Wyeth, had a major visual impact on the landscape by preserving historic buildings. So I think we all find it really cool to dig into and kind of pick the brains of this special talented group of creatives whenever we can. So Maya, I want to thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn over. Let me stop my share right now and let's see if we have some questions that we might address or any further info. Oh, yes, it says, yes, this is Aunt Hilda, Allan's sister. So there you go, is your question.
Yes, yep.
Yeah. So there's a question here about your choice of framing, especially with the look down on war work. And I did notice, you know, your compositions sometimes with those photographs are offset to one side. Is there a compositional theory behind that or theme behind that?
I'm drawn to images that aren't center, as you can see on to the right-hand side. I don't know, it's there's something about my eye that finds things balanced when they're not straight in front. And I feel like that came from my great-grandfather. This figure is also offset a little bit, and you always know when something doesn't look right, but when you don't question it, that's because it's done correctly. So in terms of framing, I use lots of different techniques, but what I really love is the jagged raw edge of things. And I like kind of seeing things that are in process or kind of not exactly tailored perfectly.
That kind of is reflected in the tissue work as well, because I feel like tears or, you know, partial pieces or you know, even with the floating pieces, you know, you can't pin them down. You can't say stay like this forever.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's the difference between fabric and tissue paper. When you mentioned earlier, it looks like fabric, it does, but the way that it moves is not like fabric, and you can't even do that with even the lightest fabrics.
Yeah.
So there's something really specific about paper.
Yeah. There's a question here, and I don't know. Someone who is from Telford is asking if you have any idea, maybe if there's a family member, if you have any idea what drew your great grandfather to Telford, which is, you know, a suburb of Philadelphia, distant, and how if there was a community of artists there working. Do you have any ideas about that?
I'm not sure, but Gregory Freelon might know.
Gregory, if you want to chime in, I will read your answer. We'll come back
Greetings,
to
everyone.
that.
Hi, Maya. Hi, Amanda.
Hey.
Hi.
And everyone else on the call. Yeah, I'm Uncle Chip. I'm Chip Freelon. Gregory Allan Freelon. Allan's my middle name. Phil's older brother.
Wonderful.
And we would visit the farm in Telford in the summers. Papa died in 1960. And when I was working my career as a television producer and director in Philadelphia, I got a group of my friends together. So I'm going to find my grandfather's farm. And that's when I went out there and did discover it. To directly answer your question, I do not know why he made the choice to move to Telford. I know that he was probably one of the first and only African Americans to own that farm. It was an apple farm, really. And Phil and I would play in the barn, and a section of the barn had his art studio in there. That's why I responded the way that I did, because we used to go run around and play out there. So why he moved there, I don't know. But I know that when I went back and met the people who had actually bought that house from Mary Kosmanov after she moved back to Chicago, my grandfather's second wife, they remembered it, and they had bought that house directly from his estate. And I remember it as being incredibly smaller than I remembered it as a child. So that's my input. I don't want to take up a whole lot of time. Maya, I love you. Your work is
Thank you. Love you
amazing.
too.
Okay.
Well, from the same person questioning, that she suggests the name of a local public library that might have some research, and this is probably for me as much as anybody else, that might have some resources to find more of the history of the property. So we'll work on that together.
That would be great. I'm down to do a road trip too, Uncle Chip. So let's do it. Let's do another.
So there is a question about your tissue sculptures, installations. It says there is wondering how you've experimented or how you have lit them. Is it daylight for the most part, or do you do something dramatic, or are you trying to achieve something with lighting them in a specific way?
That's a great question. I actually am used to gallery lighting. And so because it's so angular and crunchy and moving, kinetic with the air current of the room, I'm used to seeing it behind a white wall and kind of brightly lit. But I've also worked on several theater projects where it's in a black box and lit dramatically, and it is even more amazing to light behind light in a space that's only focused on the tissue paper, which surprised me because I thought it would kind of be muted and not be as interesting. But depending on whether it's hanging kind of free fall and freestanding, or against the wall, or in a black box space, it all looks different. So
excellent. Well, that's just, there's so many options, from different kinds of installations. I can imagine there's lots of room to run and play with that. So I want to thank you so much for spending the time, for taking us behind the scenes in your family, and what it's like to have grown up in an artistic family, and how that, translates to your work. And I was just going to answer the question that Mary Ann asked. Woodmere Art Museum is another place in our area that you can see work by Allan Freelon, and also the Michener Art Museum in Doylestown. And so I
think the
invite you.
Philadelphia Museum of Art.
And the Philadelphia Museum of Art, they have several of the prints. Several of the prints as well.
The exhibition that she mentioned, that's traveling Emancipation, the next place it's going is Williams College in Massachusetts, and that'll be opening February 16th, and that's the last place it will be. So if anybody wants to travel out there and see my work in person, it'll be there for a few months.
That's excellent. So we have a few opportunities around Philadelphia, in Williamstown, and then still remember everyone, the Allan Freelon exhibition at Brandywine is open till January 21st. So come in and see these works in person or see them anew. Thank you so much, Maya. Thank you all the family members that are behind you and that are here with us. And we are so happy to have made your acquaintance and the acquaintance of the Freelons in general.
Thank
Have
you
a good
so
night,
much
everyone.
for inviting me. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.